I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and here today with me is Ali Adams. Ali has worked for the last decade in Toronto's financial community in various capacities, and she's here today to discuss a very important cause with us. Thank you so much for being here, Ali.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. This is going to be a little bit different than our usual interviews where we talk about gold or what's going on in the market. So I wondered if you could just start off by giving me a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your connection to Toronto's financial community.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been working in various capacities in the financial services world and professional services world for the past almost 13 years now. I started my career in corporate communications, working with a number of global mining companies, food and beverage, consumer packaged goods companies, and then moved over to a division of the Toronto Stock Exchange that ran an investor relations unit. So we focused on high growth tech companies as well as financial services companies. And then I moved over to a small investment bank where I worked on their sort of marketing and communications and their wealth management division. And now I'm at McCarthy Tatro, which is a large Canadian law firm that really focuses on a number of different practice groups and industry groups. So we have sort of had a real first row seat to a number of different companies and listed issuers that your audience would be very familiar with.
Now, you've been living with type 1 diabetes for most of your life, and you're now experiencing end stage kidney failure and looking for a donor. I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit about that experience and how you started reaching out to the community for help.
Yeah, so one of the solutions to kidney failure, there's a couple, but one of them is a living organ donation, meaning a living person such as yourself could donate one of your kidneys if they were viable to somebody like me who is in need. And it's a very unique way to give and is extremely impactful. And there's a number of people, both in Canada and the US, who are in need of living organ donation, myself included. So, about 3 months ago, I put out a video on LinkedIn asking my professional network for their help. And, you know, help can come in various shapes, forms, and sizes, and isn't necessarily about, somebody giving me a kidney, but it's really about being supportive and inclusive of everyone who has sort of issues and is going through these sorts of things. So yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey to get here, and the response has really been quite remarkable. So I feel very fortunate to have had this sort of financial community behind me who has really come forward and offered so much of their time and resources to help me through this process.
That's really good to hear. I wondered if you could talk me through the process of living organ donation. What does it look like from your end, and what should a prospective donor know about that process?
Yeah, so I think the thing that I have sort of wrestled with throughout this process is I actually didn't know a lot about living organ donation prior to this happening to me. And there's a great deal of misconceptions about the process itself. One of the things that I think is really quite remarkable is it's a very unique way to support the community. And, in the context of COVID, in the context of a pandemic, I think empathy and human connection and community has really come to the forefront of a lot of people's minds and discussions. And living organ donation is a very interesting way uh, to give people a second chance at life. And that's really what it's giving me and so many other people is a second chance. And when you're able to think about it as that kind of gift, a gift of life, a gift of opportunity that we should all be entitled to, we should all have a fair chance at life. And, be able to pursue our dreams, and this is how you can do that. And from a recipient perspective, it really changes. It saves lives. It's pretty simple. So the act of donating, it's comprehensive in that there's a lot of tests involved, but the surgery itself is fairly straightforward. They do, upwards of 2 kidney transplants a day in Toronto, so it's it's a well practiced and oiled machine. And so yeah, I think it's a really interesting and quite special way to give back and to help those who are in need.
Right. And you were mentioning 2 kidney transplants a day in Toronto. One of the things that really struck me when I was reading through the comments on your post on LinkedIn where you first shared your story was how many people said that they've had a transplant or they know somebody who has. So this is obviously something that affects a lot of people. I wondered if you should or you could share some of the statistics we should know about Canada, the US. What does that look like?
Yeah, so in Canada, there's about 4,500 people who are on the organ donation list. In the US, that number is far greater. It's north of 100,000. I think the thing that's really important to consider when you're thinking about living organ donation is the number of people who have actually registered their commitment to organ donation. So in Canada, 90% of people say they support organ donation, but only 30% roughly have filled in their donor card. And in the US, that's 60%. So there's obviously a gap there. And I think part of what I'm trying to do is put a face to sort of the stories behind those numbers, and really connect people with the day-to-day stories that make up these 4,500 people who are waiting for their lives to be saved.
Right. And you've talked about this a little bit, but I do think it's important to mention that your advocacy, everything you're going through has been happening during a very tough year for everybody, really, with COVID-19. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how that may have played into the conversations you're having, if at all. Maybe there's no difference.
Yeah, I think it has, in that, um, had I gone and told a handful of people my story, I'm sure it would have reached, a fair amount of people. But what putting a video online has really allowed for is the reach to just go that much wider. And, as you sort of alluded to, the ability for people who are outside of my network, who I've never met, who I have no connection with, to connect with me and tell me their stories and offer their support. And I think, one of the things that has been so touching and so eye opening is exactly as you mentioned, how many people are affected by it. And it just reiterates the importance to me about having these conversations on how we can support, um, our communities and people living with these various diseases.
Okay. And your ideal scenario is to find a living donor. But as we're finishing up, I want to ask what options people have if they aren't able to help in that way. How can people who are hearing about your story help if they aren't able to be a donor? And you've touched on this a little bit, but just as we wrap up, if we could go over that.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of options. Donating blood is a really simple, non-invasive way to help. There is a great need for blood as it relates to people going through surgery, for emergency rooms, for people going through cancer. All of those people need blood, and it's a way to donate in such a way. The other option is filling out your donor card and, choosing to donate your organs in the unlikely event that something happened to you. And then the third is exploring, living organ donation. You can donate one whole kidney, you have two, and you can donate one. You can donate a part of your liver as well. Um, so there's different options and sort of various degrees of commitments with each that you can that you can participate in, and they're all incredibly meaningful in different ways, and one is no greater than the other. They're all very needed and very much appreciated by people like myself.
Okay, and I think definitely we'll make sure to leave some links in the video description so people can take a look and see what they can do. Thank you so much for sharing your story and really wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again. And once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and this is Allie Adams.